Joining me now is Haras Rafiq, the managing director for Quilliam, which is a think tank dedicated to combating extremism. Also joining us is CNN Chief National Security Correspondent Jim Sciutto. Jim, let me start with you. What are you hearing from your sources? Obviously, French intelligence, France's President Francois Hollande saying that they had stopped several attacks already earlier in the last week or so, several potential incidents, but obviously this one, they, as far as we know, didn't see coming.
No question. That's always the problem with counter-terror, right? The other side only has to be successful once. I'll tell you, the supreme focus of U.S. counter-terror officials this morning are a couple of things. One is that the gunmen are still on the loose. They have to find them, and quickly, before they can attack again. That's a supreme concern. And remember, in Europe, there are putative borders, but there aren't really borders. You can move from France to Germany to other countries within the EU without passing any border checkpoints, having to even show your passport. It's very easy to get around, and a lot of transportation options. So it's easy for them to run and to hide. The other supreme focus of counter-terrorism officials, as they look at this video that we're showing again now, is the sophistication of how this attack was carried out, which indicates training on the part of these attackers. The way they picked their targets, the way they used their weapons, the way they moved quickly to kill, frankly, and well, and even just the information they had that the employees of this magazine were present in the office today. You know, many, as you said earlier, Anderson, often aren't in the office. How did they know that? How did they move so quickly? And how were they trained so well to do this? That is information that is important for them right now. It is, though, too early, and I know you've commented on this, Anderson, to attribute this to a particular group, whether it be ISIS. We do know that some eyewitnesses heard them say that they were from Al-Qaeda in Yemen, but it's also a possibility that this was a group inspired by one of these groups as opposed to operationally tied to those groups, although they do show some training, which might be difficult to get on your own just as a lone wolf attacker. Still not definitive at this point, but it's certainly a focus of U.S. counter-terror officials who are, as you know, offering their help to their French allies.
Haras Rafiq from Quilliam Foundation, a group which tries to counter extremism. I'm wondering what you make of the attack, what you have seen thus far, and also the response that it has been getting from people in Paris and throughout the Muslim world.
I think, just to add to some of the things that have already been talked about, certainly the sophistication tells us about the planning, the way they hold their weapons, the way they actually go to kill, etc. But also, if you look at the way they return to the car, we know from the sophistication of planning that they've thought this through, and simple tactics and strategy tell us that if the car was their escape route, which it clearly was, they wouldn't have left that unguarded. So clearly there was at least one other person either near the car or keeping an eye on the car or the escape vehicle. Secondly, I just want to focus on something. It's very, very dangerous to actually say that this particular gunmen were inspired by ISIL, because maybe about 9 years, 10 years ago, we were talking about Al-Qaeda-inspired terrorism, then it was Al-Shabaab-inspired terrorism, then Boko Haram, etc., and now ISIL. The reality is that these groups are inspired by Islamism, and there are so many self-starters who are actually deeply entrenched in the ideology where they believe that groups, that organizations like this particular magazine are people who are portraying blasphemy and they should be dealt with in a particular way. That's what we need to tackle. That's what the community in France, that's what the community in the West, that's what we at Quilliam, and I know we've spoken about this before, we really need to tackle long term if we're going to make sure that we stop these barbarous acts from happening in the future.
Yeah, you use the term self-starters. Other people say lone wolves, but that's not a term you guys at Quilliam actually use. I know Imagine Nawaz doesn't like to use that. You focus on self-starters. To you, what is the difference?
Well, lone wolf generally suggests that it's somebody who may have been sitting in a bedroom on the internet or doing something else, suddenly decided that he or she wants to actually go out and carry out some sort of attack. Well, the reality is, Anderson, People don't go on the internet looking to buy a pair of shoes or a handbag and end up becoming a jihadi. They have to be looking for something. They have to be looking for someone, or they have to be approached by someone. And thereafter, they actually then have to be motivated. They have to be trained in the ideology. They have to believe in the ideology. And then they actually have to then work in conjunction with other people in terms of actually moving towards some sort of final attack. These particular people were not lone wolves. They were well trained. They were the attack was professionally planned. These were potentially self-starters, but they may well have been linked directly to some sort of organization. But at the end, it doesn't really matter that much for us on the long term which organization they were actually affiliated to. But we do know that they were affiliated to Islamism as an ideology, and that's what needs to be countered.